All right, hey, we're trying to film here. It's called a vlog.
That sounds really bad.
All right, today was crazy. We are like in psycho packing mode still. And then like, I have like the largest business transaction of my life that just came out of nowhere a week ago and broadsided me. So I'm spending all these times in meetings on top of that. And then we drove 2 hours to the middle of nowhere for Dove to take some DMV class.
Does anyone want a cat? We're trying to get rid of our cat.
So today's vlog is gonna be a low key, but I feel like it worked really well last time. I really enjoyed it and we got a lot of positive comments. We're gonna do it again. This is story time. Today's story is, man, I don't know if it's more sad than last time's or less. Last one's is...
What was the last one?
Last one was when you broke my heart on the Spyros deck. Saying that,
this one's worse, I think.
All right. Okay, so we got married in the year 2000. We had a kid like right away, then another kid right away. And this whole time Cammie's in nursing school. And I'm working construction, working at Red Robin waiting tables, just to pay for her to go to school, to get a nursing job, so that when she gets her nursing job, she can go and do nursing and make a lot of money, so I can go to school to get my degree, which at that time I wanted like a medical degree because we were gonna go out to the mission field. So this is our plan. And we were committed to not having any debt, and because we got married before either of us finished school, it was just kind of like what we felt like we had to do was take turns going to school.
Or so we thought.
So, sure enough, I did my part. Well, Cammie got her nursing degree, which was this like really funny thing. It's amazing to me that you did that. Because you're like breastfeeding in between classes. Hey, can we get that typewriter, like close the door so we can't hear that typewriter? Can you tell them that?
7.
Well, I could kind of do that, but kids and typewriters.
Always on them.
Children's nowadays. So yeah, nursing school was hard, but it was like amazing. You like did it and you passed and you graduated, and we went to the Space Needle for dinner, which is like, I think that's the nicest thing my parents have ever, like the biggest celebration they ever had, because I think I was a nice failure academically. Okay, so then Cammie gets her nursing job. And this is like, sweet, this is everything, like according to plan. And I had just started dabbling in blackjack. I'd got some books and I was like doing it and spending some time doing it, but it didn't seem like the most stable source of income, believe it or not. Because for those of you that don't know, I played blackjack professionally, but it didn't start off very solid. So then Cammie gets her nursing job and she starts coming home like right away and saying like, this is tough. This is difficult.
Yeah, I went on a cardiothoracic floor, which is probably one of the most technical floors you could be on in a hospital. And it was also a busy hospital.
Was it UW?
Yeah. And I very quickly learned that I was not prepared for it. In actually the most worst kind of way. Not even just, not emotionally, like more academically. Like I didn't know basic math.
Somehow Cammie got a nursing degree without knowing fractions.
And so I was supposed to be able to convert medicine into, like, convert it so that, like, I can give it to people. And I mean, it was just a really bad situation. My boss told me she thought maybe this is a quick fix. Let's just have you take a little course in-house in the hospital and see if, you know, we can, like...
Well, they were calling it a refresher course.
Brush up your skills, but the skills weren't there. And I don't think she realized that. But I was like miserable. I mean, even if you take... So I felt totally incompetent, but even if you took that out of the picture, I don't think it's hard to know what was what at the time, but I think I really didn't want to be working as much as I was working with 2 little kids at home. I think that was a huge part of it as well. But anyways, my boss very nicely sat me down and said, maybe you should go back to school. I mean, that's pretty much what she said. But maybe you could go back and take some courses and then...
So you came home and you told me that.
I did tell you that?
Yes, and we talked about it.
Okay,
and we were like...
I like blocked. This is like a horrible memory for me.
We're like...
I blocked some
We're
of this
like,
out.
no, you don't need to take more courses. You just finished school. Like, more courses, or they were calling it a refresher course, as if we need to, like, brush up. And you would, like, graduate, like, a month before. So it's like... No, if we need to, like, bust our balls and, like, study late into the night.
But see, I think actually my problem was lack of confidence. Because I think if I had confidence to, like, okay, I don't know fractions. I'm gonna figure out fractions. But I don't even think I was able to do that.
I know, but you're, like, telling the story with all this interpretation of what you know now. But back then we didn't know any of that.
Okay, yeah, okay. Yep, didn't even know why.
You were just a
life sucked.
Frightened little
so
bunny.
Much, but it did.
So,
in that way.
So we decide, when I say we, it was like mostly me, because I was like, no way, like you don't quit anything in life. I mean, I was half Korean, and I would go to school if like my eyeballs were bleeding, like it didn't matter.
And I grew up polar opposite of that, in that if something was hard, then your option was you don't have to do it. And for Ben, if something was hard, you just grit your teeth and you get through it.
But it's one thing if it's like some optional walking in the woods or whatever, but this was like our livelihood. You know, this was our 2 kids. I don't think you were expecting a third yet. But we had just moved into a place, so we had our first mortgage because we thought like getting loans and getting big houses was cool. So we had a 3-bedroom townhome that we paid $170,000 for. So now we had like a house payment. We weren't in cheap ass student housing. So we kind of like...
Which you felt all that. I didn't really have... That wasn't in my scope.
I know.
Which was part of the problem. I was kind of stunted in that area of growth at the time.
Okay, can we get on with the story?
Yeah.
Okay, so then the next day.
Okay, so the next day is actually when I had that. Or maybe, I don't remember. So the next day I must have had another conversation with my boss, and she kind of was like, maybe you should quit. And I was like, kind of like, yeah, maybe she's right. Okay, I'm just gonna quit. And this was like halfway through the workday. So I come home on the bus.
And this is after, we haven't given time frame. This is after 12 days.
Yeah.
So Cammy's gone to school in our married life.
For 4 years. Well, married life 3 years.
Like solid. Like this is all we did for her to get this job. Then 12 days into it, she shows up at home and is like, oh, I quit. I was like, wait, what? Oh my God.
Yeah.
So I was pissed. I was like, we didn't agree on this. Like, this should have been a joint decision. And I was like, you got to go back and get your job. And you were like,
I mean, I was like, I kind of started to shut down at that point emotionally because I was like scared to death to get that job back because I like realized how much I really hated it and how much I was afraid of it. And, you know, Ben's in my face telling me, no, you need to do it.
I was like, you need to go back and beg. You know, like, just tell her you know, you made a mistake.
Yeah.
Like,
and back then, like, having to have an awkward conversation was like not something that I did. I just avoided it at all costs. Like, now I could do it, but like back then, that was like, so it was almost like one thing on top of another thing on top of another thing.
And like the tension at that point in our marriage, there was nothing that I felt was more dangerous or like bad for our family than what she had done. And she was never more convinced of anything in her life that she wasn't gonna go do. So those are the two, it's like the slow motion.
It felt dangerous to me to go back to it. So things like started to escalate. Like,
so we're like, this is getting heated. I'm like, you've got to.
And well, I mean, there was just this like inner battle in me that was going on where there was no way in hell I was gonna do what he's asking me to do. But then also really, really, really pained me to like displease him in this way. I was just like stuck in a hard place, like no way out, like felt completely trapped. So I couldn't win either way.
So we are fighting verbally. And then we start fighing physically. And I don't remember how it happened. I remember where it was. It was upstairs.
I remember that too.
In the hallway. It wasn't a big hallway. And I remember you pushed Dove
out of the way
and knocked her down. And she was like 2 or 3.
3, yeah.
And I tackled you to the ground.
Yeah. It's one of those things that feels like a movie, like out of body experience. Like I have that memory, but it was that me? Was that you?
And that might be the low point of the fight, but actually it might not be either. Because then I'm like, get out of the house. Like, cause she's tackling, or not tackling, I'm tackling. She's, you know, pushing our kids away, like kind of roughly, I thought. And I'm like, go out and cool off. So I forget whether, I think I pushed you out the door and I
think you tossed
I tossed the keys.
And my keys.
And then I locked the door and I'm like, okay, she's gonna go like drive around for 30 minutes, maybe an hour.
But I was like pretty far gone at this point, like not completely, but I was just like really hurting. And I felt like I need to escape somehow. Like this is super painful. So I got in the car and I think I immediately resolved to go to Portland, which was like 3 hours away. And I didn't have really anyone to go to other than them. So that's why I decided, okay, I'm just gonna drive to Portland.
So we were in Seattle. This is Portland, Oregon. It's it's a different state. I didn't even know you knew how to get there. You didn't have any money.
I didn't fully know how to get there.
This is like before cell phones and all that.
But I figured it out. And I was in the car for maybe like 30 seconds and I was contemplating suicide. I was like, I'm just gonna run into another car and going pretty fast, but I decided not to do that, which I'm glad. And
me too.
So I somehow I was crying, but somehow I made it to these friends of ours' house in Portland.
Whom we were friends with from Bible college, which was like before we got married.
It was like this community house type deal where there was like several couples / singles living there. And they like took me in, and I knew they would, and they were like, heard my side of the story, and we're all in our early 20s. So I think everyone kind of had an immature viewpoint of like how to deal with this situation. Like, Ben's the villain, Cammie needs rescuing, and so that's kind of what happened.
Cammie like hasn't come back yet, and it's like an hour and 2 hours and 3 hours, and I'm like surprised, but I'm also like not surprised. I'm like, okay, maybe she went to her parents, and I think the thought crossed my mind that maybe she should go to Portland at this point, but I think there's some movie I was supposed to see that night.
Lord of the Rings.
Was it the like second one? It must have been the second one. It was supposed to come out, and like we had tickets, and I was like pissed because I was like supposed to go see this movie, but you like hadn't showed up yet.
And I had the only car that we own. I had the kids' car seats, and I even had their only shoes in the car for some reason.
So I'm at home with 2 kids, and then the like washing machine overflowed from the second story, so water's dripping through the seat on the first floor. Eden had taken her diaper off in her nap, during her nap, and was eating her own shit, and I couldn't go anywhere. And I start getting phone calls. This is like now maybe the next day from friends that are like, hey, heard you're being a jerk to Cammie.
Did someone really say that?
That's like the vibe of it.
Yeah.
And this is like back when you had an answering machine, and so I'm like just not answering the phone because I'm just like hearing these messages like, hey, if you need help, and all these friends that like didn't seem to care before, now all of a sudden like are trying to fix me, and I was just like, I don't want to talk to any of you.
Yeah.
Like, I'm getting calls from my RA, my
really
best
lame.
man, your brother's calling me. You know, these people like never call me, and all of a sudden they're like, you know, they think they. And I'm like, oh, of course Cammie went somewhere and just like started crying, and everyone's like, oh, Ben's an asshole.
Story of your life, right?
So I'm like still like pissed. I'm like, you know, and I think people are saying, well, you need to go get her. And I'm like, first of all, I don't have a car. Second of all, I have both kids.
She's the one who left me. Meanwhile, in Portland, I'm kind of just like trying to survive, and my friend, she like is trying to like take care of me, and kind of like emotionally I'm just like really fragile, I guess. And
I feel like they were treating you like you were a battered woman.
yeah.
It's like a shelter.
Yeah.
Because I tried calling, and I was like, can I talk to Cammie? And they're like,
oh,
no.
Yeah. And I think, you know, there was a part of me that was like afraid of Ben, but not because I felt threatened by him physically at all. It was more emotionally. I just felt like I couldn't handle whatever he was going to say to me. So maybe they picked up on that. I don't know. But they like kind of took on this role of like, okay, we're going to protect you from Ben kind of thing.
Which was pretty annoying because I'm like, I don't know, I didn't get it.
Yeah.
And it was kind of hurtful because I was like, I felt just really one-sided. Like, and I understood, especially now I can look back and I'm like, wow, I didn't understand at all, like what you were going through. But
and I didn't understand what you were going through.
But it was like, you know, it was easy to villainize one side.
Yeah.
So meanwhile, back in Seattle, I'm like trying to kind of play it cool. And I think your parents called me, and I think my parents, people like started to figure out what's up. But it wasn't cool back then to have a marital fight, especially 3 years in. Like, we thought we needed to like have it together. So like the thought of calling someone and asking for help or advice, whatever advice you get wasn't worth the outing that happened when you had to admit that your marriage sucked, or we had no idea what was going on, or my wife left me and I felt completely like an inadequate doofus. So I was like trying to like kind of contain this too.
Yeah.
And be like, oh yeah, she went out for a while, you know, I don't know. She's like hanging out with friends, and she's, you know, going through some stuff, which is actually also true.
Yeah.
But So
you get all these calls.
Nothing's working. Finally, this one pastor called me from the church we were going to at the time. And his name was Dave Sellers. I think he's the Reverend Dave Sellers now. And he listened to me. And I said, she is wrong. He's like, you should go get her. And I'm like, listen, you don't know the story. And I said, this is what she did. She was this, she was wrong. She left me, blah, 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 blah. And he said, you know what? I believe you. But you should still go get her. Because love takes into account all the things she did and then like kind of goes above and beyond that and accepts her even in the midst of that. For some reason, when he said that, I was able to be like, oh, okay. Because I feel like before that, everyone was like calling me crazy and be like, oh, you're a jerk, you're an ass, you're mean, you didn't listen to Cami. And I was like, what are you talking about? I listened to Cami. Like, we agreed on this thing. She totally violated this agreement. And now I'm the bad guy? But this guy, he never said that. He just said, you still gotta love her and go get her. Mm-hmm. And I was like, you know what? Okay. So I arranged childcare with my parents. I had to borrow my buddy's, like, Bronco to drive to my parents to get their car because it was just complicated. I forget who watched my kids. It was my buddy that if you guys saw Seven's 13th birthday video, the guy I ran into at the Chinese restaurant. So I remember driving my dad's Acura down to Portland, just crying and singing to Dixie Chicks. Because that was the only CD my dad...
You're such a man to be able to say that.
Hey, I feel like I'm a man to be able to say any of this, but that was the only CD in my dad's car. And it was like emotional enough that I was like, you know, but I just wanted to be like not in my brain at the time. Mm-hmm. So I pull up to this house in Portland, and this whole time just like thinking about like what I'm gonna say, and should I just unload? And I didn't have any emotional like checks and balances back then. No one to bounce ideas. I hardly even knew I had feelings.
Yeah.
So I pull up to this house, and I knock on the door, and these like friends answer of both of ours, but this was like the shelter house, you know. And I'm like, can I talk to Cami? And they're like, no. We need to talk to you first. And I'm just like, it just pissed me off. But I'm like, okay, I gotta play this game. And they're like, asking me all these questions. I think to see like how sorry I was or something. And I don't remember what I answered or how long that lasted. But finally, like...
I remember sitting up in the stairway, looking down on what was all going on down there. It was so crazy.
It must have been, it's really a painful scene. So then finally Cami gets brought in. And you looked like, it felt like you were in like a cult, like, or when they bring someone in after years and they're just like, and they like don't recognize the people that know them, because normally we had this like thing and that was like interrupted, like the dynamic. Like you didn't come up and hug me.
Oh yeah.
It was like.
And I was like wearing someone else's
yeah,
clothes.
It just felt weird.
Yeah.
And we talked, but then like the powers that be determined like we were supposed to sleep in separate rooms. So like that was a weird night because I was like, let's have makeup sex and move on. This will be done with.
I forgot about that. Yeah. That was so funny and weird.
Yeah, it was hilarious.
I mean, not funny. It's funny now. It wasn't funny then.
Okay. So then I don't know how we got back. I think we took separate cars back because we had 2 cars down there at this point.
Oh, maybe. I remember going out with you there, like.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I remember sitting in the car trying to like piece back something together.
And we came back home and there was like one major bump, which was like at this time, and this is what made me think about the story right now, we were planning on going on the Appalachian Trail. And once again, when I say we, I mean I don't even remember.
I remember having a conversation and me saying no, but I don't remember ever agreeing that we were gonna do it.
Well, back then, you like never spoke up about anything, and you kind of just like went along with whatever I wanted.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like, you know, I don't think you like explicitly ever were excited about much of those things, but
But I said like no, which is a big deal. Anyway.
You kind of did. Actually, your parents said no.
To the AT?
Yes. That became, this led into like...
Huh. I remember saying no, but okay.
Well...
my memory isn't really...
We sat in our living room and they like kind of said, well, we think you should not. Do you agree to that? And at that point I felt trapped.
that had to do with the nursing.
No.
That was the AT.
Yeah.
Interesting. Oh.
So that was 15 years ago.
Wow.
And that's kind of the end of the story. Except for it took a really, really long time for me to get over it. I think like 10 years.
Yeah, I think that may be true. For some reason, 8 years to me, I just remember something happened 8 years later where I felt like for the first time he would talk about this whole story and not have those like dripping like comments where you're like, oh, you're resentful. Whoa.
Well, I felt like abandoned. Yeah, I felt blamed. It was a big deal. And I really felt trapped when you brought your parents in and they made the decision. I felt like, oh, I'm not even like a dude in this marriage.
It was unfortunate. The whole thing was.
And I could not really have much sympathy for the position you were in because I couldn't understand that. And I think in the last 8 years, we developed a trust that far superseded whatever that wrong was. Mm-hmm. And I also was able to understand more of where Cami was coming from and understand that her feelings and experiences from that perspective were just as valid. And that made it so I could be like, I don't know, it took away the personalness of what you did. And I was like, oh, you were doing the best you could. And I was doing the best I could. Mm-hmm. And that's like, I'm okay with that. In fact, I remember like, you know, Adam and Jody, we did like a follow-up retreat with those people like 6 or 12 months later.
Oh yeah.
And I think they were all like wanting me to apologize at that point. And I still wasn't really feeling it because it wasn't legitimate apology. Like I wasn't really sorry for much because I was doing the best I could. And I didn't feel like I had actually wronged her, but I do feel like I was immature and I couldn't understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
But that was like that's our whole life and marriage. That wasn't just an event.
Yep.
And I remember feeling like, okay, that wasn't really good enough for them. Like they wanted like me to grovel more, or they wanted a crime, you know, because they saw you as the victim.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was that simple.
Yeah. No.
Nope. And that was the biggest fight in our marriage so far. It was so painful. It lasted maybe a week. I mean, just like even the separation part and the like not talking to each other. And then I feel like there was 3 or 4 days when we got back where it was like, it was rocky.
Yeah.
I never really thought about divorce because that just didn't really feel like an option for me. And I'm not the giving up type. And I never really heard you mention it. But it was like, this sucks. And I could not see any hope or any way for things to get better. I was like, who did I marry? I got tricked into this. It just felt terrible. But as of about 8 years ago, or whenever, I feel like we can joke about it and we can laugh about it. And it seems like a part of our history. And in fact, it's kind of a fun story to share, even in this context, because I feel like it shows how far we've grown. I mean, that's what's so cool about it now. And that's the main reason why I would share it with you guys, is just to say, if there's hope for us, I feel like there's hope for almost anyone. Like, you know, what you see right here was not always there. We were like 2 immature kids at one point. We didn't even know how to talk about feelings or deal with anything.
Yeah.
Because in hindsight, I don't think you ever should have been at that job. You know, or maybe we should have ever, you know, the whole school thing wasn't even realistic.
Yeah.
So there was a kind of like a lot of, I don't want to call them mistakes, but there was like probably, we would do things differently now. There was like, we'd see red flags that we wouldn't even know about.
Do you actually own this decision, or are you just doing it to make someone else happy?
Because if you're doing it just to make someone else happy,
it's eventually going to catch up to you.
It will.
Yep.
So, all right.
Oh.
That's our story. So I'm interested to hear, like, what's you guys' response to our story? Do you feel sorry for us? Is it funny? Is it just entertaining? Is it helpful for you guys? And do you have any fights in your marriage that, you know, are hard to talk about still, or that you can look back at, laugh on? Those are interesting things that I'd love to see in the comments.
Yeah.
Okay, quick reminder. This Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern, goodbye vlog, season finale, season 2, Fight for Together live stream on YouTube.
Yeah.
We hope to see you guys there.
Are we telling them that tomorrow's our last vlog? Oh shit. All right. See you tomorrow.